Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Syama Bunten. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. I am here today with the infamous and incredible Catherine Gray. Catherine, almost everyone listening to the show probably knows you from Show Her the Money as the executive producer. You're also CEO and founder of She Angel Investors. You have the most incredible Invest in Her podcast, which I think is just one of the most incredible platforms where you get to interview so many fascinating women in venture capital. But you're also fascinating. You've had an incredible career, a life, a journey that I can't wait to unpack with you today. Thank you for being here today on Getting Rich Together.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Oh, wonderful. So, Catherine, let's start off back when you were a little girl, back when you were maybe somewhere between the ages of 7, 10, 9, 12 years old. Where in this beautiful world were you? What was life like around you? And what was money life around you?
Sure. Wow. What a great question. I grew up right outside Washington, D.C. I had parents that were entrepreneurs. That's really where I got it from. My dad always said, you're not going to get wealthy working for somebody else. And the two of them had a business together and I just knew they kind of lived and breathed that and loved what they did. And it was a great inspiration to me. So I was always a serial entrepreneur from that. Even when I worked for a corporation for about a decade in cable TV advertising, I had enough freedom in that space to almost feel like I was in my own business. I built up my own book of business. I was top in the country in that genre. And just ran it like it was my own business, even though I was working for a big company. And that was a great way to get started.
I love that.
I was not at 7 years old, by the way. I kind of fast forwarded there.
What's interesting is I feel like, having entrepreneurial parents can really set into motion lots of different things. When you found yourself, let's say in high school, were you already exhibiting, these entrepreneurial ideas? Were you heads down in your books? Did you have any idea you were going to be in these spaces of media and entertainment? What did you think of the world in high school, and what did you think was possible for yourself?
Yeah, I think I've always just had a lot of ideas. I'm a Sagittarius, so we tend to have a lot of visions and ideas, I think. Sometimes so many that you got to pick one or two. But yeah, I think I've always been that way. I was always entrepreneurial as a teenager and then into my 20s. And even when I was like working for the corporation, I was always thinking and doing, projects, TV projects. And one of my first projects was called Way Off Broadway. And I went to all the businesses in South Florida from Key West to Palm Beach. And I said, hey, I'm creating this TV show. It's called Way Off Broadway. And it's for all the gay businesses to be able to have a presence on television because that didn't exist at the time. This was in the early 1800s. I'm just kidding. But this was in the, 1980s. And there wasn't any gay characters on TV. There weren't any shows like Will and Grace or Modern Family or anything like that. I started this TV show. I went and bought the airtime and then made the show and then put it on. It was hosted by a female impersonator. At the time that I bought the airtime, the broadcast company I had just looked at a clip and didn't even realize that it was a female impersonator. So they did a contract with me for the airtime. And then when they aired it, they got deluged with phone calls going, what is on television? What are you putting on? And there was nothing they could do because I had a contract. So I might have been the first person in the country to put female impersonators, or today you'd probably call them drag queens, on television.
Wow, that is so fascinating. And so when you were at this young age, being in high school, did you anticipate and sort of looking at, moving into, let's say, your university years? By the time you were getting into university, had you had any, part-time jobs in high school? Were you sort of the type of person who squirreled away her dollars to save up for things? How did you sort of approach these early moments, I guess, of self-independence as a young one?
I did always have a job, more so to be able to enjoy myself. Like I've always been big on that. Anybody who knows me, like number one, yeah, make some money, put some away, but make sure that you're enjoying it too. That's why we're here. Life is short. But some of the jobs I had, I worked part time one summer at Disney World. That was really competitive to get a job there for spring break is actually when I worked there. And just to work there for that spring break week, you had to compete with hundreds of people. My other friends didn't get selected
How
because of
did you
that.
compete? So like what were the stakes here? Like how did you was it like, like what kinds of activities did they put you through to compete for this job?
I don't know that I remembered that. I just remember, I guess a lot was, it was based on, I guess, personality and
Okay.
also your passion about being there. But here's the thing that you can't believe is that my friends didn't get in. And the reason was because they had accents, New Jersey accents. And yeah, back then Disney wouldn't hire anybody with an
No.
accent. Can you believe this? Times have changed, thank goodness, but that's how it was then in the 80s. Yeah, that's a true story. I think it was
I
around
mean,
1980. Yeah.
that is so wild.
Yes.
That is so wild. Okay. So here you are in high school, you're getting jobs at Disney, you're having a good time, you're getting ready to think about university. Where did you sort of launch into for your university education? What did you think at that time was available to you? Or was it already, okay, I'm going to go and do something bold. I have entrepreneurial parents. I'm going to make it big in Hollywood. Or was it more conservative in terms of how you thought things were going to be? What was the next step in your mind?
I I actually studied broadcast journalism, thinking I might work in the news arena. But after I had an opportunity to actually do that, because they had such an amazing school there, you could actually do everything filming, editing, reporting. But I realized that the news wasn't for me. It was very high pressured and you had to get it done by the end of the day. I'm more of a creative type. I didn't want that kind of pressure. Yeah, I was really glad I went to broadcast journalism school there. It's one of the best in the country at University of Florida. They had an actual, studio and you got to do everything hands on. And
Wow.
it was a wonderful experience for what would be my next thing, what would be going into cable television advertising and producing commercials and things like that. So it was a good catalyst to what I ended up doing. But I've always been the type that loves to also incorporate creativeness into what I'm doing. And I think the balance for people is how do we do what makes our heart sing and then tie in what helps us to also make money
Mm.
and to marry the two, which is always sometimes a challenge. So,
Were your
yeah.
parents, rather supportive of the direction that you were heading into? And obviously them being entrepreneurial, sometimes I feel like it can either push us into being also entrepreneurial or send up spidey senses where it's like, okay, too much risk, need
Yeah.
to scale back or need to find something more secure. How did they look at supporting you and your vision, let's say, during this emergence out of university and starting to move into these areas?
Yeah. Right out of college, I had moved to California and started a photography business, and they were very supportive. I think they always instilled in me that you could do anything.
Mm.
And I think I'm one of the lucky ones. I know a lot of parents don't do that. And then just the very fact that they were successful, I just looked at that and felt inspired by it. So, yeah, I think they were very supportive.
I love that. Okay, so right out of university, you launch into, let's call it your first entrepreneurial endeavor, starting a photography business. Obviously, California is not cheap. no matter where you're living in California,
Yeah.
building this first business and starting to really be on your own 2 feet and really start to figure life out. What was that like for you? How did you kind of manage these early days of booking business, managing your
Yeah.
expenses, figuring out life?
Yeah, I've always been pretty resourceful. So I booked about, I think it was 5 or 6 universities that were my clients to to shoot their graduations, their sororities and fraternities and things like that,
That's
making
so
it into a
smart.
business.
I mean, that is like
Well,
to come out the gate and be like, all right, like here's the business model. That's amazing.
yeah, and it was part of a structured company that I aligned with that I built out my own franchise. But I would do resourceful things like I think, we didn't have cell phones then. I'd like go to a campus, a payphone and say, oh, Catherine Gray will happen to be there this weekend. Could she meet with you about signing up your fraternity or sorority for your upcoming events and providing these special photographs where it prints the name of your event on the photograph, and they'd be like, yeah. And they'd be like, where can we call you back? And I don't think I had a phone yet. That's why I was calling from a payphone. And I'd be like, oh, she's so busy that she'll call you back in 2 days or something like that. So I had to be resourceful back then.
Oh my God,
Uh,
I love that. I remember my early days before phones. I remember there was this company called, I think it was called like One Box or U Box, and it was this like phone number I could call where it stored all my voicemails, but it would also store emails and it would read to me the email over the phone. And it's so
right,
funny to think about these very basic rudimentary things that at the time were so innovative, right? Where it's like, how
right.
are we hacking our way to get through business? It's so fun.
Yeah. I mean, my first phone was the size of a milk carton. It was ridiculous. And if you look back on it, you looked pretty ridiculous. That's how it started. And I remember, before all this, so I remember first there was the beepers, and I was like, oh, this is a pain. The beeper goes off. Now you got to find a payphone. You got to call the people back. So it was great when the phones the size of Milwaukee came in and you carried that around, and it was progress. But of course, yeah, it doesn't feel like that long ago that we,
It doesn't. So you have this photography business. It's so cool. You built out a franchise for a young person to have the ability to say, I'm going to actively go and do this and be strategic, I think is really incredible. So where did you go from there? You're in California, you're hooked up with all these universities. Is it how long before you say, okay, I'm ready to make the next step? Was it, or a different move? Was it a financial reason? Was your heart calling you in different directions? What happened?
yeah, I really listen to my insides, and the universe kind of steers that. And I felt like at that time it was time to go back to the East Coast. I went back and I fell into cable television advertising. I think the way it went was I think I read about it in the paper about this cable television advertising job. And they called me in, and then I didn't get the job. And then about 2 months later, they said, oh, the other person didn't work out. Are you still interested? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And I didn't even really know what cable television was. I mean, there was only 4 channels. And then when I would go to promote it to people, they'd be like, oh, yeah, I think CNN is that sports channel. And I'd be like, no, no, that's the news channel. And then there's the sports channel, ESPN. And people didn't even really know the channels then. And there were so few of them. I know I'm really dating myself, but the bottom line is I've got to be in cable television advertising when it became that local businesses could run ads on television. And it revolutionized television advertising because before that time, small businesses could not advertise on TV. Only large corporations like Pepsi and Coke and things like that. But it was cable television advertising, local ads that revolutionized that whole opportunity for small businesses to get in the game. And it was a very, very fun ride. I got to get into an explosive new industry, and it was really fun. It was really effective in helping people grow their businesses. I got to create their commercials and create marketing plans for them and see their businesses grow and have them become local TV celebrities. Became one myself, and it was just super fun. I did that for over a dozen years, and it was a great way to launch my career.
I mean, how incredible. Also, like, talk about once again entrepreneurial, right? To be heading up a new revenue stream, a new channel, something that would become almost the bedrock of how we think about things that companies can do to get exposure. So fascinating. As you were writing this high, and I feel like these first 10, 15 years of our careers really sort of help us cut our teeth, right? It's like you learn a lot of the things that you will do or not do for the rest of your life sometimes, develop a strong sense of work ethic. It also is interesting because in your specific area of work, I'm curious, like, was it salary plus a commission on the sales? How did you also, as this young person who's out here now helping to facilitate the growth of other businesses essentially through selling these cable television ad spots, how sort of thinking simultaneously, I guess, about your own finances at that time? Was it, I'm going to save my
Yeah.
money and invest it? Was it, I get my bonus checks and do something with it? What was your early financial life shaping up to be?
My early financial life was, first of all, they kept cutting the commissions because I was making so much money. I was making as much money as like the top three guys in the entire AT&T media company.
You
They
were
were like,
so good.
they're like, who is this? And how do we stop her? But this made it super fun. And I had a lot of flexibility. Like I said, it was like running my own business, had a big book of business. I was one of the first people in that industry. So anytime you're on the ground floor of something, you get to explode with it. How I handled my finances at the time was that I would, of course, first pay my bills and then absolutely first invest money, save and
Wow.
invest. And then whatever was left, I would have a good time. And so I always believe in that balance of bills, then pay yourself first, or why are you working? And then taking the rest and having a good time because life is short and we should really be enjoying ourselves. So
Wow.
yeah, I
That's a lot
I
of
kind of
foresight
implemented that.
for a young person. Where do you think you might have picked up on that? Because that is, to be a young person in the world and say I'm going to pay myself, for people, and dare I say also me, when I was in the early stage of my career, was like, I need money to go do things. So, like, I
Yeah.
need to go make it happen. So where did you sort of get these early inklings of, oh, I need to save and invest? Where do you think that came from?
Yeah, I used to really read a lot about that.
Mm,
I think, knowledge is power. Looking at how did other people become wealthy and reading about that. So I'm a big believer in books.
wow. Any
And
influential books or people who sort of left any impressions?
I think I read things like, it's been a while, but like The Millionaire Next Door or,
Yeah.
Think and Grow
Yes.
Rich, all of those things about the psychology of it, what you say and think and do and how that impacts the outcome.
As you sort of continue into the years following, did you find somewhat tangential, I guess, to money, but a mindset perspective and from a content standpoint, when it comes to building our money and having some foresight around this, have there been, or have there been specific people or books, or do you still continue to sort of feed that part of yourself as you've grown up through your adult life?
Yeah, I still read books to this day and try to, and now podcasts
Sure.
like this, Getting Rich Together. Yeah, I think we get a lot of content from other people's experiences. And I think everyone in their life, when it comes to money, has ups and downs. Like, have I ever made a bad investment? Of course.
Mm.
Look at when the real estate market tanked and I owned 3 or 4 properties at the time. It was a hard learning experience for sure. But it's how resilient are you, right?
Sure.
And I think that's important. And to have a very diversified portfolio,
Mm.
super important. I've definitely learned that over the years. And I'm glad today that we're going to also talk about alternative asset classes that a lot of women don't participate in where a lot of the wealth building actually is.
Absolutely. So, okay, so you spend over a dozen years at AT&T helping them make shit tons of money. You're also stacking cash and like
Yeah.
doing good. At this time, so you had your savings account. Had you bought your first property yet? What were some of the financial milestones that maybe dotted your early tenure?
Yeah. In my 20s, I had bought a place that I was renting. That was my very first real estate purchase. And I'd rented it for a couple years and I went to the owner and I said, "Hey, been saving up some money. I'd like to buy this. Can I buy it from you directly?" And he's like, "Sure." And I think I bought it for, and this was on the water with this fabulous view. I think it was $95,000. And I literally immediately put it back on the market at 135. And I thought, oh, it'll never sell at that. Nothing in this building has. But I immediately got an offer for cash and they bought all the interior furniture from me too. I literally walked out with my toothbrush and about $40,000 or $50,000. I was like, oh, I kind of like this.
Oh my gosh, Catherine, what a W. That is amazing.
Yeah.
So then now you've seen like your first, like, let's call it outsized return, right? Like
Yeah.
something that's like, okay, I'm good at this, right? Like I'm seeing something, I'm good at it. Did you take that money and flip it and say, all right, I'm gonna go buy something else? Like what,
Yes.
okay, tell me about that.
So I took a minute and then I wanted to move from Miami to Fort Lauderdale and went up there and looked at a place and I wasn't planning to buy it. And I think it was about, trying to think of how much it was. I want to say 175 or maybe they were asking 200. And I said, oh, I'll give them 175. And the realtor said, oh, they'll never take that. And she said they had moved and they already had a second mortgage. Well, just ask them. And if so, I'll pay cash for it. And sure enough, they took it and I got a real deal. And then I went in and gutted it and renovated it and swore I would never do that again. But it did look fabulous.
So how old were you at this point of making this second purchase?
Oh, I think I was maybe 30,
Wow.
something like
What
that.
an
28,
accomplishment.
30,
How
something.
incredible, Catherine. And so at this time, allow me now with what you're doing professionally. So clearly there's like a real estate thumb inside of you and things are probably sparking and I'm pretty sure we're going to hear about building a real estate empire pretty soon. But before we get there, what were you doing professionally? How did your sort of career start to track forward?
Yeah. So after that, I got tapped to help start a gay cable network. And everybody said, "You're crazy. You're going to walk away from this big paying job and do that." And I was like, "Yeah, because this is going to help change the world." And I thought if gay people could see themselves on television in a positive light, then this would be a game changer for young people. And left my job to go help start that. And it was the most exciting year of my life to that date because every day I was getting up doing something I really, really loved and believed in and was passionate about. And I thought, I'm always going to be doing something that makes a difference for the rest of my life because this feels really great. And even though about a year later that actually didn't happen, they didn't get enough financing, but the year that I spent doing it was absolutely blissful, doing something so important. And I met the most incredible people. And it was just very, very rewarding. And I brought in advertisers just like I did for cable TV. So like I would talk to Showtime and I brought them in and some other advertisers that said, oh, we don't have any gay TV advertising dollars. And I said, of course you don't. There's never been any gay TV. So how could you have it? I said, you got to take it from your regular TV or your print and put it over here because this is an important market for you to reach. And so I did raise several million for that endeavor, but it just didn't get we were maybe in 60 cities, something like that, but it wasn't enough to make it happen. And I think at the same time, Logo was starting to launch, which is really interesting because in my opinion, Logo has never been the gay network that it could be. I
Mm.
wish I had had a thumb in that, because most people in the LGBTQ community don't even know about Logo. And the programming, I don't see where it enhances the stories or lives of most gay people. It never became what I think it could have been.
Mm.
But anyway, that's what was happening at the time. And that kind of was the one that came out as the leader in that. They had a lot of backing from Viacom and so forth. Oh, but it was a super, super interesting time in my life, and I wouldn't trade it for
It
anything.
also sounds like an incredible synergistic moment of like you had mentioned, doing work that inspires with impact, but then also like very much as you were talking about fundraising, right? It's like we're out here getting money. I mean, well, we haven't yet touched on venture capital, but this concept of fundraising and going out there and getting money, it's something that you essentially had been doing since the beginning of your career in terms of
Yes.
understanding the psychology of what it takes to sell and tell a narrative, and also how to position a new product and how to be able to get people to see value and potential. And I think that is super
Yeah.
fascinating in these early, really formative years of your career.
Thank you. And then the very next thing after that, I did raise money to and also invested in getting my first documentary, which was called I Can't Marry You. And I went to an HRC event, had the opportunity to meet Ellen DeGeneres' mom, Betty DeGeneres, who was very big at the time in HRC, which is the Human Rights Campaign. And I asked her, hey, will you narrate this documentary about same sex marriage? And she said, absolutely. And so that's how I made my first documentary. And I always thought it would be on PBS, but they had turned me down. And I was like, gosh, I really thought, I mean, like, I really, really got a download that this would be on PBS. And right when I had finished it, I let go of the fact that they weren't embracing it. I couldn't figure out why, because I thought, gosh, I thought I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that was going to happen. And the next thing I knew, the minute I let go of it, I got the call and they said, we want that film because now you can get married in San Francisco and Massachusetts. And we have no films about the federal rights and benefits and protections that come with marriage. And that's how I got my first documentary on TV, which I heard was like winning the lottery. It was like one in a
It's
million.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool, Catherine.
Yeah.
What was it
Got
like
lucky with that.
fundraising for this film, being out there? And certainly now it's like,
Yeah.
as again, fast forwarding us also to now your experiences also as an investor, right? At that time, you said you also invested your own capital. How did you think
I
about,
did.
you're again a young person, I imagine at this point, mid 30s, early 30s, doing this project. You're looking at your stable real estate, your savings, your investments. How did you decide what to pull out and allocate to this? And then what did you decide you needed to fundraise? And what was that process like?
Yeah. So first I extended it to make it myself. And I realized, as we all do with things we do, that I wouldn't do that again. It's better to get investors and do it as a group. But when I got on PBS, I had to immediately get sponsors. And I was really lucky because in the LGBTQ community, there were a couple of big travel companies that were gay. One was called Olivia, and the other one was RSVP, which I think they're both still around. I know Olivia is. And they did put up the money for me to be able to put that on PBS. So forever grateful to them for being the underwriters and sponsors to put it on PBS. And then PBS ran it for, I think, 3 or 4 years because there wasn't a lot of content out there about same sex marriage. Like I said, especially the federal rights and benefits and protections. When I made that movie, believe it or not, my own gay people said, why are you making a movie about same sex marriage? That will never happen. And I was like, it should. I'm a big believer. Yeah, I'm a big believer it's film and television that helps change culture. You have to educate people. And if they didn't know any gay people, let's put ourselves in their living room so that they could see these couples. And by the way, the couples in my film had all been together, 10 to 20 to up to 50 years to show here are people that are together in a family unit with children, with pets, and they have the same issues and problems you have. Good days, bad days, challenges, triumphs. they're just like you, and they should have these 1,000 rights and benefits and protections that come with marriage. And by the way, here's how they're affected because they don't have those.
Mm,
And that's really what the film was about. I always believe it's storytelling. When you humanize an issue is when people start to understand it.
that's right. Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. So the film gets produced, it gets onto PBS once you let it go to the universe, and things start to unfold. What happens next for you in your career and financial life? Is it now I'm going to produce the next film and start to understand more of the business mechanics of like how to do this and keep doing it and make money doing it? Was there sort of a next step towards going back into doing something more corporate? How are you starting to think about what was next and what was exciting for you? And then also starting to navigate, okay, what does this mean to me in my maybe personal life or my financial life?
Yeah. So I did travel the country with that film. And then I don't remember exactly the trajectory, but I ended up from New York now after I made that into California, where I started a production company. And yeah, was trying to build up a production company that would be a financial success. And I did everything from corporate shorts for corporations that were just getting into understanding that marketing now was video shorts on social media and in their businesses. And then I also had actor shorts to help actors try to launch their career, as now you can no longer send a headshot. You needed to actually have been in a movie. So we would produce like little mini movies for them to show their acting abilities. I found out actors really don't have any money, but the corporations did. It was an interesting ride. And then I just felt a calling to go into the arena of putting on events for women. I just felt that calling that it was time for a little shift in my career to make sure that all women were coming together and not separating ourselves out. I was seeing that I go to these conferences and as a gay woman, not really feel comfortable being there and thinking there has to be something where everybody feels included.
Mm,
I'm sure people of color felt that way. I'm sure other people that are different have felt that way. And wouldn't it be nice to just create workshops and events where everyone feels welcome? And I think if it's a gay woman running it, well, then certainly other gay women felt comfortable coming. And I started putting on events, the Live, Love, Thrive conference, did a Live, Love, Thrive book, and the Live, Love, Thrive podcast, and launched all that to help start trying to empower women and talk about things like mindset and how powerful that is in creating what it is you want to be doing. And along the way, while I was doing the Live, Love, Thrive conference, I started to understand and learn more about angel investing.
mm,
And I started a pitch fest at my conference, and it was called She Tank. And I did this because I heard that women were underfunded and weren't getting funding for their businesses. And I thought, let's have a pitch fest with an all-female panel that would invest in these women. It was hard to find women that would be investors.
mm.
And I was realizing there's a shortage of women investors. And how are we going to fix this? Anyway, we shot that, and it was called She Angel Series, because we got a cease and desist from Shark Tank about She Tank. But She Angel Investors, I decided was a better name anyway. And so the She Angel series still exists online. You can find it, She Angel series, and then Invest in Her, which is my podcast. And we followed their journeys. And it was so interesting to see that it wasn't even just the money. It was also having that vote of confidence from those women investors that they believed in them,
Mm.
that gave them the confidence to go on. And also mentorship was as important as the money. And then from there, I started to learn about venture capital, and that really put me on the trajectory that I'm on now, which was creating the Show Her the Money movie and taking that around the world. We started out at film festivals and won a half a dozen or a dozen Best Documentary Awards. We then did theatrical releases in New York and LA and ended up getting on the Academy
It's
Award
amazing.
consideration list. I wish I could say we won, but we got on the list. And then from there, after we did those theatrical releases in New York and LA, it just organically grew into a 100-city tour. We got so many requests from around the world. I think it was because there wasn't at the time, and still isn't, a movie about venture capital and how women are only getting 2% of the funding and how we can change it. But presenting it in an engaging storytelling way that people could really get excited about and relate to. And I think that's been the magic of why people have loved the film so
I
much.
mean, I am also in the camp of people who love the film so much. So, Catherine, starting to see this ecosystem pop up around you as you were building these conferences, as you sort of looking at your own I always find it interesting. It's like we learn things around us and then we start to assimilate and integrate and make shifts and changes. At what point and what was your first, let's say, alternative investment that you made, and how did you think about that? And obviously people don't realize that investing in film, investing in entertainment are also within that purview of alternative investments, right? From my
Yeah.
vantage point, you started very early investing in your own film, but let's say outside of yourself, when did you write your first check outside of yourself investing into another business or entity? And what were some of the early experiences that you had?
The very first thing I did was I said, "Oh, you can't learn about this without doing it." And so years ago, I got involved with Alicia Castillo-Holly, which I have the utmost respect for, one of the leaders in the venture and angel investing arena. And I thought, wow, I can really learn from her and learn from doing. And I joined her Wealthing BC club and started investing in individual companies that they would recommend. And I knew she was great at vetting them and whatnot. And so that was my first foray into it. Then when I started making the film, I met the star of our film, one of the stars of our film, Pocket Sun, who started SoGal Ventures, youngest woman to ever start a fund, and invested in her fund. And then I just got to understand more and more about venture capital and how I felt like it really made sense. So many people start in angel investing, which I think is great when you invest in an individual company, but it's super risky. That company may or may not make it. Still, if you highly respect the founder and you really believe in what they're doing, I recommend it because it can also be very lucrative should it be successful. But at the same time, as I learned about venture capital and why women were only getting 2% and how are we going to fix it, I realized there had to be a vehicle to have women understand what is venture capital, why would I want to invest in it, and how lucrative and how impactful it can be. So many men have been making so much money in venture capital for so many years. Women don't even know about it. And they're not going to invest in something, obviously, that they don't know about. So I thought we have to make a film to educate them and inspire them because, as you and I know, women are coming into more money than ever in history.
Yeah.
What are they going to do with it? They can have such an impact. And women they're so thoughtful, they invest differently than men. They invest in things that really matter to their kids and to their family and to the planet. And so we need the innovators, the
Mm.
women with those downloads for those issues, and then we need the women to invest in those. And women tend to make a better investment. So why wouldn't we be investing
That's
in
right.
women? Makes perfect sense, right? What I love about venture is here you are pooling your money together into a fund, just like a mutual fund. And then the people at the top, the experts that are running that fund, are deciding where to deploy that capital for you so that you don't have to be the decision maker. You don't have to be the one that knows how to vet them. And I think that there's a plus in that, as opposed to angel investing. I think venture capital is less risky and very exciting in that you typically have an opportunity to meet the founders that you're investing in, maybe even help them. I think it's such a cool way to invest one's money. Not all of your money, obviously. Everybody should diversify into all different types of things, but every woman should be putting 2 to 5% that qualifies as an accredited investor into venture capital, like I said, because it can have much better returns than the public
Mm.
market. For me, once it gets to the public market, it's already seen all the majority of its gains in comparison to venture capital. But it's an exciting arena for women to step into, and that's my mission with the 100 City Tour, is to have the film educate and inspire them to look at venture capital as an alternative asset that their wealth advisor might not recommend because maybe they won't benefit from it. Maybe their company doesn't offer alternative assets.
Mm.
We have to put it upon ourselves to educate ourselves on it and step into that arena and take that risk, because that risk can pay off. And more importantly, it can make a tremendous impact. So this is how we leave our legacy and leave the world a better place, is by looking at alternative investments as a way to impact the planet.
I think that's beautiful, Catherine. You mentioned 2 to 5% of overall assets sort of going into this segment. I think risk is such, and diversification, it's such a personal topic. We've had a lot of guests on the show, some of who will say very outrightly that they're not invested in the stock market at all and everything's in venture and real estate, and some people are only in the stock market and venture, and some people are, have a little bit of a lot of things. Where do you put your, let's say, risk tolerance and appetite today when you're to look at the areas and things that you're invested in? How would you talk about your pie, and what are the areas that you're focused on right now?
Venture capital angel investing, yes, in the public market, but not a big fan of it. And I do believe everybody should have money in real estate. And then I just read the other day, only 1% of land is owned by women. And that's pretty scary. We should be owning more land. So my wife and I have diversified into land also in California. I do think it's important to be very diversified. And then one other thing that you and I touched on earlier, the arts. I think we should be investing in the arts. I am so grateful to all the people that invested in this film, because it wouldn't have been made possible without them. And I have heard nothing from them except that they are glad that they invested in this film, because they know it will absolutely and is making a difference, and that they've had such a fun experience being a part of it,
Mm.
going to the screenings, just we have a book coming out, just being a part of everything that has been exciting and fun around it. And there's not many investments that you can say are exciting and fun, but you and I have talked about before too. I'm a co-producer on a Broadway show that's very women-driven. Genius woman wrote it, created it. It's about motherhood and the impact of social media. You never on Broadway, or rarely, have a show that is written by a woman, directed by a woman, predominantly all women in the background, orchestrator, choreographer, and all of that on Broadway. And I think if we can put money into the arts to help make a change and give more creative women the ability to produce shows, that will be appealing to women who end up buying 69% of all the tickets. The messages that we put out there in the theater and in film and television, the movies, it's so important. And as an investor, you help decide what those stories are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's powerful.
I love that. That's beautiful, Catherine. I feel like we could talk for hours. I feel like I have skimmed so many fascinating topics, and your life has been dotted with some interesting and incredible experiences. As you're sort of looking to the future, you mentioned a little while ago about legacy, so thinking about
Yeah.
impact, thinking about what's unfolding. Today, as we both know, we are living longer than ever, sometimes longer than we would like, I think. Look to a young age of 103. What are you expecting to look back onto this body of work that you've created on this planet? What does that body of work look like?
I've seen such a groundswell of women really stepping up to the plate and creating these amazing entrepreneurial groups, angel groups. I see a real momentum happening. And when I leave the planet, I hope I look back and say, we did it. We did it. We are now the majority investors. We have impacted what the world looks like politically, investment-wise, all of these ways. And that we, as the Dalai Lama says, the Western women will save the planet. And I would love to see that in the next 20 years that we do that and turn it around and make it a women-friendly, women-supportive, peaceful world out there. And it's going to take women to do that. And we have that capability. And we have, even despite the politics happening now, I do believe we have a lot of wind at our backs. Ladies, we've got this.
Oh, I just love that. My favorite final two questions. The first is we often talk about the show, for most of the show, about investing and, how we look at saving our money and all the serious things about our money. But you and I both know money can be very fun. There are a lot of great things we can do with it. Ways that it brings us joy. What are some of the most recent ways, Catherine, in which your capital has brought you joy? What fun things have you purchased? What experiences have you gone on? What are some of the fabulous things your money's been doing for you?
I'm real big on experiences. So I love travel. Last year, I went to over 50 cities with the film. I just think that's one of the best ways, and spend it visiting friends. We're planning a group friends vacation coming up. So I think family and friends are extremely important, and experiential time with them. So that's what I like to spend my money on, more than things, more experiences.
Oh, I love that. And then my last question, Catherine, the show is really intended for everyone in the audience to continue to uplift and support those who are on the show. What can we do? What are you calling in right now? What is it that we can do to help evangelize and champion what's important to you?
Sure. Thank you for that opportunity. First of all, they can go to showherthemoneymovie.com. On there, you can see where the screenings are going to be. You can book a screening. So we continue to book the screenings all over the country. We feel it's very important to still have the in-person experience where we can have a conversation about venture capital and how you get involved in it as an investor or as an entrepreneur looking for funding or as a woman that wants to start her own fund. So yeah, visit our website for sure. And then our She Angel Investors website, if you want to connect to me and understand how do you get involved in investing and how do you get involved in fundraising. I do keynote speaking on this. Of course, I have the Invest in Her podcast that brings a lot of free resources to listeners. So that's really what you can do, is reach out to us about those. We are helping to start a global fund, so I can fill you in on that as well. And then the Broadway show. Those that are big Broadway fans can contact me about that, because I'm really big on us building that up, because I do believe it is film and television that helps change culture. And I'm super excited about the impact of that. So yeah, all those things. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn, so anybody can reach out to me there. Catherine with a C and Gray with an A, and I'm happy to chat with you.
Oh, Catherine, you're the best. Thank you for all that you are, all that you've done, all that you will do. It is takes so many of us holding up torches to move and inspire and share stories and do things in our own unique way with our fingerprints to make things happen. And I'm grateful to know you, and thank you for being here on the show today.
Thank you, Syama. So appreciate you. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.